Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make these scarves. There are two different kinds. One is with the thicker yarn and one is with thinner yarn, just the basic acrylic yarn. So stick around and I will show you all that you'll need to make these wonderful scarves. So one of them is with the acrylic yarn. So I am using this Super Saver Stripes. So since it's a scarf, I feel like this will be pretty fun to just have the striped. Have something that kind of goes with that, just simplicity of just doing a scarf. And this one is in the polo stripe with red heart. It is a medium 4-weight yarn. And since we are knitting these, this one specifically says that you need a US 8 or a 5mm knitting needles. I don't have those knitting needles, so these are 7. The other one I have is a 10, so I could do one or the other. I've actually done with acrylic yarn a size 10 and it's not been a problem. So you can kind of play around with what works best for you, and it also depends on what you're comfortable with when it comes to what size needles to work with. So if you like working with bigger needles, then you'll want to have thicker yarn. If you want to work with smaller needles, you'll have thinner yarn. So I have 2 skeins here, and these are in 5 ounces. I don't think I'll need both of them, but I have it just in case, because sometimes you just need a little extra to finish off. But I'm really hoping to just use this one, so we'll see what happens with this tutorial if I end up having to use the second one. It doesn't hurt to have an extra skein of your color, especially when you're not sure, because being able to find the exact skein and color can be super tricky, and sometimes it doesn't match as well. So always make sure you have another skein just in case. And then for the more chunkier scarf that you saw, I'm doing it with Lion Brand yarn, Homespun. This one is in the color of Corinthian. So I wanted to do something just a little different. I like all the different colors, so I think this will be really fun for a scarf. And it's a much thicker, it's thicker than the acrylic, and it kind of poofs a little bit, so it'll make it kind of softer. So this is a bulky 5. So I wouldn't say it's a very bulky, like compared to a 6, but it is on the bigger side. And then I'm using my 10 for this one just because it's a little thicker. But you can use whatever yarn you want. Just know that in this tutorial, depending on which one you're following, you may have to tweak it according to your yarn because it all works up a little differently. So, which shouldn't be a huge deal because this is a very basic pattern. So it'll really just be about how much you cast on and all that. That's really the biggest thing. And then you'll also want to have a pair of scissors for at the end when you're snipping off and casting off your yarn. And then you'll want to have your sewing needles. This one is specifically designed for yarn. It's not the ones that you use if you were to like sew through fabric. This is much thicker, and so it's meant to go through and work with yarn. So I have a small size, which I usually use for my acrylic, and I have a much bigger size that I use for bigger yarn. The homespun shouldn't be a huge deal because it's really not that thick, but if you're using something a lot chunkier, you will definitely want to have one like this. So make sure you have the right size for those. And this is optional. I think it'll be very helpful when it comes to getting your measurements and stuff, is having a measuring tape, just so that you know how long you want yours to be. I'm going to be talking about measurements and stuff so you can follow on how yours is measuring up close to mine. Just is always handy to have a measuring tape. Alright, I'm going to show you guys doing it with the acrylic yarn first. Later on in the video I'll do it with the thicker yarn, so I'll have little timestamps for all that if you're more interested in the thicker yarn. So I'll have you guys get to the end of your yarn. You'll want to measure about 20 inches to have your cast on string. So just give yourself a little bit there. I got mine going about 20. So that's where you'll want to do your slip knot. And if you don't know how to do a slip knot, I will have down below link to do a slip knot. And also we're going to be casting on. So if you don't know how to do those with knitting, go check out the description down below. I'll have a whole playlist for all that and how to do all that in a much slower pace, because I just want to focus on making the scarf here for you guys. So I got my 7 US 4.5 millimeter needle. So you want to attach that to your slip knot. And then you'll want to cast on 26. So you get those going and I'll meet you after you do your 26. Alright, so make sure you count all your little loops here to make sure you have 26. So now this is where we'll need our other needle. And you're going to knit into each of these loops all the way across. And if you're not familiar with on how to do this knitting technique, that's also down below in my how to knit playlist and beginners, for beginners. Alright, I just knitted into all of those loops. So you should still have 26 loops because we didn't increase or decrease. So if you're missing one or have more than 26, then you probably increased or decreased by accident by working into one of these other stitches that weren't on the knitting needle. So you may have to go back and fix that. So you should never be changing from here on to keep our straight edges. It should always be 26. Now this is where I said that if you wanted to make it slightly bigger or smaller, that's going to depend on how much you want to cast on. So that'll be more on you guys if you want this to be a bigger scarf. So if you want it to be a lot longer, you would cast a lot more on. You'll have a much longer yarn when we first cast it on, so you'll probably have to have more than 20 inches if you're wanting it bigger. But the way mine is starting to work up right now is it's looking like it's going to be about 5 inches wide. So if you're wanting something bigger, you'll just have to tweak that. So from here on, we're just going to keep knitting all the way. I'm going to figure out how many rows or how many inches long my scarf ends up being so you guys can know how long. Alright, I've been knitting away for hours now. This has taken me quite a bit of time. Knitting, I feel like, is very time consuming, especially when you work on something super long. So this is pretty long, but I really love how rainbow this turned out with the stripes. So I measured mine because counting stitches would have been really hard. So the measurements with this, it ended up being about 53.5 inches. And I ended up using one skein already, so 5 ounces of this one. And then I had to use just kind of a little bit. You can even see here where I had to start my new skein. So it used a little bit. It didn't use the whole thing, but it used a good amount to kind of meet the end here. You're welcome to do this even longer. So if you're using the same kind of yarn and you want to go even longer, go for it. If you want to go shorter, go for that too. It just depends on what you're and who you're making it for. If you're making it for yourself or if you're making it for someone smaller or bigger, that's all that will really depend on. So now I'm going to be binding or casting off my work. And as a reminder on how you bind off or cast off your work is you'll knit one, you'll knit the second one. Now this is where it's different. You'll take this stitch right here. You'll put your needle underneath it. Now go very slow in this part. So you'll want to pull this stitch over this one and off your hook or needle. Very carefully. Now you'll knit the next one. And this is where our repeat will start happening here. Then you'll pull this stitch over this other one very carefully. And you just keep repeating. So you'll knit, and you'll pull that one over that other one. And as you're doing that, it's creating your little knots to kind of knot these in place, and also finishing off the stitch. So just keep, you'll knit, and then pull this one over, and you'll do that all the way across. So I'm going to do all of these. All right, I'm down to having 2 little loops here, still doing our knitting, and then moving that one over. We got our last one here. You'll still pull this one over that last. Just carefully. This I think might be the hardest part of this whole thing, is just trying to get that over it. All right, now keep that loop on there. So I like to, because this is where we're going to have our little tail, I like to give myself just kind of a little bit to work with, because I will want to weave this in. So having, you know, not very much, but enough to work with. Get that out of the way. And then this part, I kind of lift up the loop when I have my needle in there, kind of lift it up just a little bit. And I like to take my little tail and kind of put it through that hole to create a knot. Just kind of gathering it here. Create that little knot. Just tightening it here. That way it won't go anywhere on us. There we have that all finished off. And then you'll just want to weave it in. I kind of just look for some stitches, like right in between here, I'll weave in there. So you'll want to grab your needle, your sewing needle, thread that. And you'll want to take, just kind of pop under some of those stitches that I was talking about, the ones that kind of go in between, the ones that go, you know, kind of like little, I don't know, they remind me of like little macaroni noodles, just kind of wavy little noodles in there. So just go in between kind of with those V-looking stitches in there. But make sure you're getting underneath them, not like what I was just doing, because you don't want it to go way through. And I want to go back. So this is the one I just came out of, so I'm going to go over it to go under the other ones. Working my way back. That way you create a nice secure woven in end that won't go anywhere. You'll take your scissors and cut as close as you can. And then if you had to do like I did, I had right here where I had to attach the yarn. So you'll just want to create like a little knot to kind of secure those two pieces. And I usually try to do it twice just so it doesn't come loose. Do it as tight as you can. And then I'll weave in just like we just did on both of these separately. Now for those of you that are wanting to do it with a yarn like mine or on the thicker side, this might be helpful. A helpful tutorial on that aspect. So with this thicker yarn, you're going to want to measure, and this is going to vary, so you'll have to tweak and figure out if this is how big you want yours. This is how big I wanted mine to be. So you'll want to measure 25 inches. So this will be the yarn we are going to use for our cast on. So I'm gonna go about 25. So that's where I'm gonna want to put my slip knot. And if you don't know how to do a slip knot or any of these basic beginner knitting techniques, I have them all in a playlist and have different videos in a much slower pace that you guys can watch. I'm just going to be focusing on the basics of just making this scarf. So definitely check that out if you need a little bit more help. Alright, so grab your knitting needle. This is the 10 I'm using for this thicker yarn. You want to put your needle on through that slip knot. And now you're going to want to cast on 27. So like I said, see if that works for you, if that's about the length you want. It's going to be kind of a guessing game. I've had to do a lot where I'm like, oh, is that enough? And then you're just going to have to tweak how long you want your cast on yarn to be to figure out how long you want this to be. So it might be a little bit of trial and error until you figure out what you want to do. So I'm going to get my 27 cast-ons, and then I'll meet you guys back. Alright, so make sure that you count each of these little loops to make sure that you have 27. Now this is kind of where you're getting an idea about how wide this is going to be. I usually wait until I do the second row to kind of get a more of a feel, because this is kind of more loose, whereas once you add the second row, it gives more of what it's going to shape out to be like. So by the second row, you'll have an idea of, do I want it to be this wide or do I want it to be skinnier? So you're going to have to pay attention to that once we get to the second row and after you've done that to make sure it's what you want. So now we're going to need our other needle. And we're going to knit into each of these 27 loops. So we're going to do that all the way across. Alright, I just got done knitting all the way through all of those. So this is our second row so far. This is where you're getting that idea about how wide this is going to be. So I'm looking here, we're looking at just a little bit over 5. And it may be slightly less than that because their stitches are all kind of spaced out. So that's about, you know, how you have an idea. Sometimes it might take until a couple more to really get a feel. But this is where when I'm trying to figure out the size, this is how I find out if this is the right size. So if you're happy with your size and you're doing good with this second row, you're just going to keep repeating of knitting every single row. And I'm going to get the measurements here on how long mine ends up being. Alright, I've been working on this for a couple days now. And it's gotten quite long. I've actually gotten to the point that this is all that's left of that skein. Unfortunately, it's a little shorter than I would prefer for a scarf, but I don't have another skein of this, so I'm just going to let it be a little on the shorter side. If you want to make yours longer, then I would recommend having another skein if you were doing the same yarn that I'm using. And I measured this is about 44.5 inches from this end all the way to literally where my needle is. So if you're wanting to go a lot longer than that, definitely get another skein. If not, if you're doing this for a much smaller person or shorter person, then you'll probably be fine with this. So now we're going to do our cast off. So if you are getting close to the end like me, I'd make sure you have at least where it's doubled. So I'm lining up my yarn here, so it goes probably about triple of length. So you'll want to make sure you have enough just to cast off your stitches. You probably won't need all of this, but it's just good to be safe just because it can vary with the yarn you're using. Oops. So you'll need your other needle. And to cast off or bind off your work, you're going to knit just like we've been doing for the first stitch. And then you'll knit the second stitch. And then this is where it becomes different. So you're going to take this first loop right here, and you're going to want to pull it over this one and off your needle. So you'll just very carefully and take your time. This yarn's been kind of tricky with me because it likes to split on me, so trying to get underneath it's tricky. So you get underneath it, and if I'm worried about this falling off, depending on the yarn I'm using, I'll hold that in place as I'm trying to slide this off. And sometimes it gets really close to the end there. Just try not to let that come off too, otherwise you'll lose your loop and it might be tricky to fix that. So take your time on this part. There's really no rush. So we're gonna knit again. So you'll always have 2 loops on your needle when you're getting ready to start taking the other loop over. So you just keep repeating that. You'll pull that over on top, because as we're doing that, you're kind of creating these knots over each other, if that makes any sense. So you'll knit, and you pull that one over that one we just knitted. So every time you have 1 loop on here, that means you need to knit 1 over. And then when there's 2 of them, you should be pulling the first one over that second one. Just keep doing that all the way to the end. So I got really close here, guys. I must have underestimated just a little bit. I'm literally on my last one. So what you would do, I'm gonna try my best on telling you guys how to do this. I'm literally on the last bit here, but to do, when you're down to your last one, you'll still do what you've been doing. I can't do it, but you'll yarn over like you would. Maybe I can. It's gonna be close, guys. And then you'll pull that last one off. I'm a little challenged here and limited on what I can do, but you're gonna pull this one over like you did before. And if you have more of a tail than me, what I would do, I can't really do it because I need just like this much more yarn. But what you would do is I typically will give myself, like, if you can wiggle it and make this loop a little bigger and take it off. And then I would take my, I don't have it, but if you had a strand, and then pull it through and then pull a knot, and I would secure it. I don't have that option right now because literally on the end of here, but you should have a scarf by the end. So I'm trying to solve my little issue here where I don't have very much left. And so what I think I'll do is I'll come back to this. I've got quite a bit here that I'm going to weave a little bit in, but maybe I'll be able to help finish it. This is all kind of a trial here. I'm not sure what I'm doing. You're going to learn with me, everybody. So I'm going to see if I can just kind of, I just need a little bit of yarn here. So I'm going to be weaving this in. And knitting is a little trickier when it comes to weaving in. A lot of times I just kind of find where my little loops are. And just kind of tuck them in. And just kind of follow it too. I just kind of see where my loops are and go under them. Kind of zigzag through. A lot of times I also work my way back, just so that it's secured. I don't know if there's really a better method with knitting on how to weave in your ends, but it seems to work for me because those aren't really going to get tugged or go anywhere. I always like to test with my work, and if I'm pulling and it doesn't seem like this is moving, I usually feel like that's secured. And I just have just enough here that I think I might be able to just get that by on that other end. Because I don't really want to buy another skein for just a few centimeters, you know. So I'm cutting that off. We'll see if I can use that over here somehow. Alright, I'm going to grab my needle again because my things have come undone here. And then this one just goes back because it doesn't have anything worked through it. So I went back a little bit, very carefully went back to try and recover some of this so I have something to attach. I apologize for my scraping here. Let's see if I can set that there so it's not scraping up your guys' audio. And I'm just gonna kind of try and, because this is kind of fibrous, so I'm just gonna kind of twist it a little to just kind of incorporate the two. It won't be perfect just because I'm just improvising this whole thing. If this was acrylic yarn, I would just tie it and handle it a little differently, but because we're right on the end here, I think I'm just gonna try and play with it and see if I can incorporate the two together. Okay, so I ended up just tying it. That seemed to be the best way to just tie this on. It's really hard because it's separating the way I cut my yarn, and the little thread that's been kind of holding it together came off. So I just decided to tie it. We'll see if that can help me stretch a little further. I just need literally a few centimeters of this yarn to just get this finished. So disregard what I said in the beginning. You probably will need 4 times the amount of what's even left to even make this work. So don't do what I'm doing, otherwise you'll be literally trying to squeak by with the last bit here. Can't get my needle under this thing. So like I said, you'll just get this one over. So I'll be fiddling with this, trying to get this to get on over. Okay, now the part I was talking about. Now I can show you guys. So before you take it off your needle, I like to thread. I mean, with this yarn, I'm going to use a needle just because it's a little finicky. If it was acrylic yarn, I wouldn't worry so much because it doesn't fall apart like this one. And so I'll lift up just a little bit so I have a loop. And then you'll take it and go right through that loop. And that'll create your knot. So, like I said, this one's just kind of more fray of a yarn, so I would do it this way, but acrylic yarn is less likely to fray like this. And then now you just weave in your ends, and I'll probably tuck these in somehow to fasten everything off and make it look a little nicer. So somehow we made this work. And just enough yarn to make this happen. And we're just weaving it in as best as we can so it doesn't go anywhere on us when we're wearing it. So what I'm kind of doing, just because these ends are so small that trying to thread my needle is just not going to happen, so I'm kind of just pushing it underneath one of these loops to kind of get it so that it'll go in. It's kind of also probably getting kind of, I don't know how to describe that, but where I'm kind of like pushing it into the pieces of yarn that are already here. I'm kind of like poking it into under the loops. Just because it's a little tricky to work with. So I kind of push that in, so I'll do that with this one where it's just kind of pushing it under the loops. It's a little time consuming, but at least it gets tucked under and it's not sticking out and looking like that. And this one I'll just clip because it's long enough. These ones, I don't want to clip them because that's where my knot was. And if I clip them too short, it's more likely for my knot to come undone. That's why I'm tucking these in like this. Because otherwise it'll just come undone. Whereas this is more secured by just poking it in and having it stick underneath and between the fibers in a way, because it's kind of getting pushed in and under stuff instead of having it stick out and get tugged. And you wouldn't even know. So clip your other end and that'll finish off our scarf. Thankfully, you know, we almost didn't. So there we go, we got it all done. Colors turned out really fun. I kind of like how these colors turned out. Kind of like a rainbowy, Christmassy feel. My dog was really close, so there's hair all over this thing. I hope this tutorial was helpful for you all and that you were able to follow along for both of these scarves and be able to make your own scarves. If you have any trouble during any point of the video, drop it in the comments below and I'll see if I can help you guys out. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button and the little bell icon next to it so that you'll be notified every time I post a new video. Happy crafting and keep creating beautiful things. Until next time, everyone. Bye!